Well, thank you so much for inviting us to be here today. My name is Amy Taylor. I'm from the University of Idaho, and co-presenters were already introduced, and they'll introduce themselves probably again as we take turns with this. We have a short presentation for you, but we're just going to alternate about every couple slides who will speak on next. And this presentation is prepare for a successful transition to post-secondary education. And all of us are members of the Idaho Partnership in Higher Education and Disability. That's a group for disability service offices throughout the state of Idaho in higher education. Next. So one of the things we like to talk about first and foremost is some of the key differences between high school and post-secondary education. In high school, special education, like, you're gonna make me remember them all? It'd be a good test, right? So in high school, familiar with special education department, following the IDEA Act, and just very brief overview of the IDEA is that it's the school's responsibility to help identify and then support individuals with disabilities. And they do that by creating formalized plans. Might be familiar with terms like 504 or IEP. Those are very formalized, structured plans that follow that law to help the student be successful. And so that's going to include accommodations, adaptations, might be a reduction in type of work, different environments, lots of different things go into those plans. And the focus is on success. They want the student to be successful and to graduate high school. So moving into post-secondary, some of the differences are we don't have a special education department. It's going to be a disability service office, and it's going to be the student's responsibility to self-identify. So we follow different laws, and those are going to be the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. And part of that says the individual needs to identify as having disability. And once they do that, we engage in what's called the interactive process to determine presence of disability, the barriers, and what possible accommodations there are to create access. So the emphasis there is that no one in the college is going to try to identify a student with a disability. It is the individual's responsibility to contact the disability service office and say, hey, I think I have a disability and I need accommodations. And then it's only for accommodations that we provide. We are not able to modify the content really of any of the courses. Those are set up by the academic curriculum. What we can do is create accommodations for access. So if the format doesn't work, then we can adjust that. But as far as what work the students are asked to do, we can't really change that. So the focus is more on the access than success. Next slide. So access is the goal. And what we mean by that is what is the barrier that is related to the disability that we need to create an accommodation for. So we look at physical barriers if the disability is physical in nature. Then we look at other barriers such as the classroom format for everything else. What are we looking at that's creating an issue? Are there discussions? Are there lectures? Are there online components? Is there a presentation? Are these creating any barriers to the student based on their disability? And then how are students being assessed? So what is the outcome measure for the class? We look at technical standards. We look at what's required in the course when we're making these considerations. And then we look at the assessment measures themselves. Are there exams? Does a student give a presentation, papers? And are those assessment tools creating barriers? And then one of the things we look at is the student's strengths or weaknesses when we're having this interactive process. And that can give clues to what type of accommodations are going to be successful. And then we also look at what accommodations worked in high school. So I always encourage students to bring their 504 plan or IEP to our meeting so we can reflect on what has and hasn't worked in high school. That is not going to transfer over to college directly. It is going to be a reference tool to talk about a history of accommodations. All right, and I'll turn it over to Cheryl.
All right, thank you, Amy. So can you all hear me? Okay, how do I get my screen to show up on the presentation?
Oh, you want me to stop
my
sharing?
video? Well, I was hoping my video would show up.
Okay, you should be able to share now.
Oh, okay, hold on, let me get that up then. I just thought my picture would pop up there and it wasn't for presenting.
The only thing that will show is the presentation view with the slideshow on it. Your picture will be off to the side.
Yeah, it was showing Amy still up, but it wasn't showing me as talking. So
I can hear you if that helps.
yeah. Okay. And how's that looking?
I can see the presentation and all three of you on the side, so I think we're good.
Okay, great. So as Amy was saying, the accommodation process is different, and what we are able to accommodate is different in the post-secondary education level. So regardless of your status as a student, if you have accommodations or without accommodations, all students are required to meet the same learning objectives. So the integrity of the course is protected, which means that course objectives, learning outcomes, assessments, those types of things cannot be changed. So some possible appropriate and reasonable accommodations at the college or university level, things would look like potentially extra testing time, the use of technology to access the test, such as a screen reader, maybe use Dragon. Additionally, at CWI, we can have a reader in the room with you if you need a reader. Things such as a limited distraction testing room could be a possible accommodation. Note takers or note-taking technology is often used in the college setting. Books, class handouts, those types of additional tools that the instructor might use, those could be provided in an alternative format, such as a PDF that could be used with a screen reader. And then unlikely accommodations at the post-secondary education level. So these might be things that students had in high school or middle school, such as reduced number of questions on tests, reduced number of choices on a multiple choice test. That can't be changed. Different types of tests can't be changed. So if you're given an essay test in college, but you're used to having a multiple choice test, that is not an accommodation we could make. That would be changing the course objectives. And then a reader who explains or rewords the test questions. So there could be a reader in the room, however, they're not allowed to change the wording of the test question to help you understand as a student. And then opting out of a group work or group presentation, that sort of accommodation is not something at the college level. Okay, and of course there's other accommodations. It's just really dependent upon what a student is needing and what is appropriate for their disability. Next, oh yeah, I'm doing the slides. Okay, some really important tips as you transition from high school to college is becoming more comfortable advocating for yourself with your disabilities. That's going to be crucial as you make this transition. As Amy mentioned, it's really the onus is on the student to come to the student resource office, the disability office, and request their accommodations. So they're also going to need to have that conversation requesting their accommodations with their instructor. Maybe they need more time on a test. So really helping your students, whether it's over the summer, you're practicing with your parents, or maybe before you finish school this semester, you're working on advocating with your instructors at high school level. But really honing those self-advocacy skills is going to be extremely beneficial for you as you transition. Other skills such as problem solving is really helpful. So if you are not sure, you remember your instructor saying something about what was due when, but you're not quite sure where or how you heard that information, using your problem solving skills, going to your syllabus, checking that first before you're reaching out to your instructor is going to be really beneficial for you. Students that have a realistic understanding of their disability, and then being able to understand how that relationship between your disability and your accommodations interact is really useful in the college level. So sometimes we'll meet with brand new students and their parents have been a really big part of them accessing their accommodations. So they're not quite sure at this point what their disability and their accommodation have to do with each other. So spending some time, and Wendy's actually going to provide some help with this on how you can sit down and try and think about how they work together and what your disability really limits you and what you might need assistance with. Getting more comfortable with your time management and organizational skills is something, even seasoned students struggle with. So it's very helpful to work on that, as you can. Keep in mind, there's a lot of resources at each college that are available to students, especially incoming students who might need some help with your basic study skills, such as note-taking, how to study, your reading strategies, how to take tests and stay calm, and of course, time management and organizing skills. So keep in mind that there are a lot of resources available to you. And if you have questions, you're always welcome to talk about it with your coordinator. Okay. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Wendy. Wendy has a wonderful worksheet she's going to go over with you all.
Can you share?
And Wendy, we
unshare?
have about 10 minutes left in this presentation.
Okay. Let me full screen.
Okay. So what I'm going to and I'm sorry, my camera's here and my my sheet is over here, so awkward not looking at you all. But this is also the presentation, and the link to the preparing for the shift worksheet are on the schedule, tonight's schedule. And this is something we came up with several years ago that kind of wraps up what Cheryl was talking about. How do you get comfortable? How do you practice? How do you learn to be a good self-advocate? And we always suggest to students, sophomore, junior, senior year, run your own IEP meetings. The outcome's not going to be any different because the school has to do what the school is going to do. But, be prepared to talk about what it is, what your barriers are, what accommodations work for you. And this helps you kind of plan for that. So when you come into Disability Services Office, Amy was talking about the interactive process. We're I shouldn't say we're much more informal than an IEP. There's you and the person you're talking to in the DS office. So it's a conversation. So one of the things we need to understand is that accommodations remove barriers. Okay, they don't guarantee success. They don't change, like we've been saying, the way the course is taught or you're assessed or any of the technical standards or educational outcomes. They're really kind of boring, blah things, extra time on a test, book in an alternate format, note-taking technology or a note taker. Not real exciting stuff, but it's very, very helpful stuff. Okay. So when you're talking to your disability services provider, these are questions that you need to be prepared and should start thinking about now. Be prepared to answer these questions. Okay, so you've got an IEP or 504 plan on high school because my disability is what? Be specific. We've noticed over the past couple of years at Boise State, people are able to name what their disability is. In the past, when I first started working here, people would say I have a learning difference. I was like, okay, that's not disability. Everybody has a learning difference. What is it? And I know sometimes parents are reluctant to have their students in the educational meetings because they don't want them to know that they've been labeled with a disability. It's actually really helpful, that label. Yeah, there's negatives to it, but it actually means something to us. And then we start thinking, oh, okay, students who've had this experience before have used these accommodations successfully. Let's talk to the student a little bit more and see if this would be on the right track. A really hard one for people to do is name how their disability impacts their learning. I'm a slow reader. People always tell me, I say, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? I'm good at this, I'm good at that, I'm good at this. Math is, I said, well, join the club. Everybody's bad at math. Everybody struggles with math. I shouldn't say everybody, 90% of the people I talk to struggle with math. What is it about math that is difficult? Okay, what is it about reading that is difficult? What happens when you're taking a test? Okay. Those kinds of things, and the more specific you can be, that's really, really helpful for the conversation. Those are the two really big questions. And then on the back side, or the second page of our sheet here, we've got kind of a planning tool. So if you write down what accommodations or adjustments or modifications or whatever you want to call it, you're using in high school, and then the reason why you're using, again, you're practicing that, connecting your disability, the barrier, and the accommodation together. And then on a scale of 1 to 5, how helpful is it? We have a lot of students who come to higher education and they say, well, I had, 6 different accommodations, but the only one that was helpful is this one. I was like, oh, okay. So we're not going to do the other 5. Why implement something if it's not helpful for you? Okay. And then you can write down over here in the last column things to ask. What the heck is note-taking technology? I have Smart Pen here. People keep talking about Smart Pen, or they keep talking about Otter, or they keep talking about whatever. What is that? How does it work? Is that something you do here? Okay. One thing I do know that at least at Boise State, and I think all the institutions represented here, is we rely more heavily on technology than you might be used to in high school. So if you have a reader for an exam in high school, you might be offered a screen reader. So the computer will read the question for you rather than an actual person. Okay, depending on how big the office is, how many students are testing, how many accommodations, that type of thing. So you might not get exactly what you have in high school, But again, we're looking at what's the barrier and what do we have available at our institution that can help you get over that barrier.